views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime. And for those of you that asked the question, what are the social justice forums? Well, we're a show that actually brings you a deeper understanding of the issues and the inequities that many people face. We also present multiple points of view, and then we promote civic engagement. So we encourage you to stay with us because the Social Justice Forums starts right now. And welcome to the show. Well, the New York City Department of Education recently made an announcement saying that it's launching a new plan to help students recover from learning loss due to the pandemic and its shift to remote learning. Gaps in access to school resources fall along racial and socioeconomic lines, and the gap has been magnified during virtual learning and virtual schooling. Students of color have suffered more learning loss than white students. Unequal funding at the state and local levels maintain well-resourced schools in mostly white neighborhoods, while those serving mostly Black, Latino, and low-income neighborhoods are also struggling to finance basic supplies. Well, schools are also predominantly Black or Latino, and students of color are also overrepresented and underserved in certain school populations. We're going to talk about this because joining us to share a little bit more about this discussion and give us more details is the Vice President of Admissions and Placement at Oliver Scholars, Mr. Mychal. And Mark, good to have you with us.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here and sharing in this most important discussion. And I want to say that, when we first started prior to COVID, there was already this educational gap and there was this school to prison pipeline that really needs to be addressed. And now in the wake of COVID-19, a lot more of these things have become more and more exacerbated. So give us a little bit more about what you're seeing by way of educationally and how things are falling along racial lines.
Well, as you said in your opening, the COVID has just exacerbated what we already knew was an insidious problem. I read a recent report from McKinsey that predicts that the learning losses of Black and Latinx students will be twice the learning loss of their white peers. So the structural inequalities that already existed in the system have been exacerbated by this pandemic. And we knew there was a digital divide, and now we're relying on the internet to provide educational access to students. So in that one brief example, if we know there's a digital divide and there's a lack of access to high-speed internet or computers. For example, in New York, I believe they took a survey and found out that over 300,000 students did not have access to one computer. And if you think about it now, in a home where 2 or 3 students might be in a home and each need their device to access their school, you can start to see how that exacerbates the problem that we're discussing today.
You're confirming what we were trying to report because we've heard from students, we've heard from parents, and we've also heard from teachers that when it comes to certain populations, some still don't have computers, some still have inadequate Wi-Fi, and therefore some people are calling this a lost year. How do you feel about the call to make it called a lost year, given the fact of what we already know?
Well, from a lot of the students we deal with, we deal exclusively with Black and Latinx students who we recruit from the public school system, and then we follow them throughout their high school and college years. And the reports we're getting from them is that their virtual experience is not what they thought it would be. If you talk to a variety of families, they can count on the number of times that their student actually is in front of a teacher for instruction. And we already knew that a reliance on homework or asynchronous learning only widens the achievement gap, right? Because it then relies on a parent being accessible to help the student sort of advance or engage. I joke with people a lot that, during this pandemic, I've become the dean for my kindergarten, my daughter who's starting kindergarten, because I have to make sure that she's engaged. But if I was an essential worker and was not in the home, then who would be able to do that, right? Who would help my daughter engage in this learning?
Yeah, and I don't think people sometimes take that at full value. That if you are an essential worker and maybe you're a single parent and your child is left to have to do some work, yeah, they may fall through the cracks. And you know, when you talk about providing a much needed service, you're out there providing a much needed service, but your home is educationally falling down.
Right. So that's a catch 22 or like more than that, right? Like,
Right.
and so I think in our communities where a lot of people are essential workers or frontline workers, I think that even further widens the gap that we're talking about. If you're not able to be home to assist in your child's learning, then you know we see what other places have been reporting is like a drop off in engagement, where you know a student will not you know be engaged on the online platform for you know weeks at a time. And so, you know, that I think is quite literally a loss, right? And you could refer to as a lost year.
Right. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has recently released his educational plan, not without controversy. I want to get your thoughts on the mayor's plan and how do you feel that's playing out, and particularly in communities of color?
Well, you know, I think you, just like everything else, people are waiting to see what the city is going to actually do for them. You know, the DOE made an effort to get computers and Chromebooks and the like into the hands of students that would need them. But as you reported earlier, not everyone has them. They also haven't really addressed this issue of places not having reliable high-speed internet. So even if you have a computer, if you don't have reliable high-speed internet, how's it that you're going to be able to engage effectively in these courses? So I think it's really you know it's up to the city to actually step up and do things that people can see and can feel like they're solving their problems.
Yeah. And when we talk about education in New York City, obviously, you guys are doing a great job of pretty much working with African American, Latinx students and trying to raise them to that top bar. Excuse me, for somebody who's not so familiar with the work that you do, Oliver Scholars, give us a little background.
So we prepare talented and Black and Latinx students for success in top high schools and colleges. But really what we're trying to do is to help them become leaders. And so they have the ability to come back and affect their communities however they define them, right? And so what we do is we recruit seventh graders, and we're recruiting right now and looking for people to nominate talented seventh graders, high potential Black and Latinx students. They'll go through an admissions process with us and an initial scholar immersion program where we do a lot of enrichment, a lot of skill building to prepare them and help them access the education that we think their talent deserves. And after that initial 14 months, we follow them throughout high school and college, providing much needed support for them to help to take advantage of these educational opportunities.
When we talk about educational opportunities, how do you see things playing out right now, particularly for African American students of Latinx? Because when we look at colleges, when we look at admissions processes, we know that they're still being challenged today for equality and equity, getting to that next level. What are you seeing from your work with students and them being able to make that transition to higher education?
Well, our students are incredibly successful. We just got some awesome early decision news last week where we're hearing that our students, after going to their high schools, are getting in early to schools like Columbia and Harvard and Williams. And so we know that when you give students, Black and Latinx students, the access to the education that they deserve and the support to make it through those environments, that we know that they're going to shine. And we hope, you know, it's my hope that, you know, our students serve as an example of what can be done if you give students an opportunity. My real hope is like that a place like Oliver Scholars doesn't have to exist, right? Because everybody's getting to the access to the education that they deserve. And so that's really what we try to do with students, and are seeing incredible results for our efforts.
Yeah, you talked about students getting accepted to these top name schools and universities. They're doing a great job of really closing that achievement gap, right? And I think that when you see graduation rates and acceptance rates, this is the path to closing the achievement gap. But give us a more practical tool as to what we can do to better do that, because admittedly, there is this disparity that continues to widen and widen and widen, but you got a little secret sauce in there.
Yeah, I mean, our secret sauce is really a holistic approach to youth development, right? From the moment where we're trying to identify students, we're not just looking for students who have 90s across the board. We're looking to find potential to your whole application to see if we can see evidence of you having the potential or desire to succeed, right? And I think that holistic approach permeates through the rest of what the organization does. We not only support students, but we support their families, because you can't make it in life as just an individual. And so when we accept a student, we know that we're going to have to take all that they experience into account when we're trying to support them throughout their educational process.
Yeah. So we got some parents who are watching right now, and they're saying, listen, Oliver Scholar sounds really cool. I like what they're talking about, the services that you provide for students. What's the process and the criteria for admission to be an Oliver Scholar?
So right now we're admitting 7th graders, and the process is very easy. And I would stress to them, if they have a little time off during the holidays, to just nominate. All they have to do is go to oliverscholars.org. There's a big apply button, enter their contact information, and we will get in touch with them and lead them step by step through the process. What we're looking for, like I said, are high potential, hardworking Black and Latinx students who really have a desire to excel. And hopefully by May, I'll be getting back in touch with these wonderful parents watching to offer them a spot in Oliver Scholars.
And then after they're accepted, talk to us about what happens from there. They're accepted into the program, and then what?
It's actually awesome that we get to talk about it on a show like this. Our students who might have been experiencing a learning loss last summer were in a 5-week rigorous academic program with us. So that's how we start. We have a 5-week rigorous academic program focused on enrichment and starting to sort of to fortify the skills that we know that are necessary for success at some of these schools and in the world. And after that 5-week program, we move into the fall when the placement team starts working with families to figure out what kind of high schools might be the best fit. During that time, we also offer Saturday programming, which is a mix of academic programming and test prep. And then we end our scholar immersion program in the second summer with an additional 5 weeks of instruction, after which we celebrate our students as they move on to their wonderful high schools. And then there's a team that actually of scholar counselors that visits every high school and every student that we have that are our partners to make sure we're supporting our students during their process.
The importance of actually catching students at that particular grade level for entry, right? How important is that, and why is it significant to start where you start?
I mean, to tell you the truth, I wish we could start earlier, and catch more kids before that really formative time between your 8th grade and your 9th grade in high school. I think for us, there are a lot. We deal with a lot of partner schools where a major entrance point for them is the 9th grade. So most of the boarding schools we deal with, we deal with both boarding and day schools in the city. But many of the boarding schools we deal with have accept most of their students in the 9th grade. So from a strategic standpoint, we can find the most seats during that time. I wish we could start identifying students younger and work with them earlier and sort of make up some of these gaps that that our program is designed to do. But obviously, if we can find some funders who want to support that initiative,
Yeah.
they should get in contact with me.
Yeah. If you can start early, that'd be wonderful. But right now, the work that you're doing is incredible in terms of turnout, in terms of graduation, and how these young people are really going on to brighter futures, college acceptance, and the universities that they're attending. It's amazing to see the work that you guys are really putting out there and putting boots on the ground. What do you want people to know when we talk about education and social justice? Because the two words, somebody will say, nah, they really don't go along. But the reality is education is a huge part of social justice.
Yeah, I mean, to me, they're entwined. They're the reason I do the work. I happen to luck into a quality education, and I don't want that to be the future for anybody. I think every student, regardless of where they were born, what they look like, what their parents do, should have access to a high quality education. And so, just from that standpoint, it is a social justice issue. It is something that children have a right to. And if they're being denied that right because of where they're from, what they look like, how much money they have, I think that's something we need to fight against.
Yeah, putting our voice to it. For people, before we go, people want to get connected with Oliver Scholars, go right ahead, help us to get connected.
oliverscholars.org. Right now we're looking for nominations for 7th graders. Once you nominate and give us some contact information, my wonderful admissions team will reach out and start the application process. We also do have videos and information and more stats online for people to review on their own. But obviously, my contact information and my team's contact information is also on there, and we'd be happy to talk to anybody who has any questions about Oliver Scholars. But I can't stress enough: nominate. Nominations will close the first or second week of January, and we hope to be able to access as many students who meet our criteria as possible.
Mychal, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for coming and being with us here on the Social Justice Forums. Great work with Oliver Scholars. Good to have you guys back on the show. Take care and have an awesome holiday.
You as well. Thanks for having me. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. All right. Well, we will be back. We've got more show coming up. Don't go anywhere. We'll return with the Social Justice Forums right after this.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash your hands frequently, learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's gonna go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from BronxNet,
and welcome back to our show. Food insecurity will be a defining moment of our time. When we talk about COVID-19, it certainly exacerbated the number of food insecure households, and policy intervention is needed immediately. The think tank and the Thinkubator recently released a policy brief on holiday food insecurity in the Bronx. Now, the report explores the devastating impact COVID-19 has on the Bronx, as well as hunger. The report also amplifies other reports, coining the Bronx as the new face of hunger. It released data on food insecurity during the holiday from nearly 100 Bronx residents representing all zip codes of the borough. Here to provide more information is the Thinkubator's founder and CEO, Dr. Edward Summers. And Dr. Summers, good to have you back with us.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here to talk about this really important issue that's impacting our community.
Yeah, and when we talk about food insecurity, obviously for many people during this holiday time, you talk about giving gifts. Usually gifts is what we give at Christmas. The reality is that forget gift giving. Many people are just struggling to put food in the refrigerator, and that in itself is almost a gift.
Yeah, you know, you touched upon one of the reasons why we decided to do this survey. We conducted the survey prior to Thanksgiving, and what I noticed just in being a Bronx resident, that around Thanksgiving time, we always have these big drives, turkey drives, and you hear about these turkey drives all across the news. And then when Christmas comes, you hear about the toy drives. And every so often you hear about some organizations doing a toy drive and can't drive together. But for Christmas, you mostly hear about these toy drives. And I do think, you know, Christmas is about the kids, right? Let's celebrate, let's give them gifts. But the biggest gift in this year in particular, and in previous years, but this year in particular, is food. You know, that's the gift that is critically important for so many lives in the Bronx and all throughout New York City. There was a report released that there's something like 1.1 million families throughout New York City that are food insecure, that don't have access to adequate meal per day, you know? And so we have a huge problem exacerbated by COVID-19, the health impact, but then the economic impact as well, with people losing jobs during COVID-19. So the best gift you can give during this time is giving family a meal or meals to get them through this holiday season.
And when we talk about your report, obviously it takes a look at a lot of zip codes across the borough. Talk to us about, are there any particular zip codes that stood out and anything that really surprised you there?
Yeah, you know, so the South Bronx continues to be the community that lags around. But what our report looked at was, as you indicated, all the zip codes throughout the borough. And what we're finding is that while the South Bronx is still the most neediest, we saw a need throughout all zip codes throughout the borough. So even up in, you know, Riverdale, where most people think it's Riverdale, it's not really the Bronx. It is the Bronx, and they do have households that are food insecure in Riverdale. During the height of COVID-19, the Thinkubator, formerly the Bronx Private Industry Council, worked with the Bronx Community Relief Effort and a number of churches in Riverdale to support those most needy in that particular community. So what was shocking to me, quite frankly, is that the need was all over New York City, unlike what we normally expected to only be concentrated in the South Bronx. So that was very challenging. And then what's even more challenging is thinking about children. There's something like 17 million children throughout the United States that are food insecure. And you know, we see that all throughout the Bronx, and we see that in our programming as well. as the Thinkubator, we've hosted programs throughout this past several months, and in talking to our young people, we noticed that food is it's a challenge for them and their families, their friends, and so that was really startling. The number of food insecure young people who are hungry. And so it's a challenge in our community.
I want to look at some of the numbers that came off of your report here, and I have them here in front of me. A report says about 84% of the respondents actually said they'll spend the holidays at home. Nearly 50% of respondents said that they don't know where they would find financial resources to pay for a holiday meal. 39% stated that items such as turkeys and side food items would be helpful during the holiday time. And 52% of your respondents said that they like additional meals from programs such as World Central Kitchen Direct or other programs that deliver prepared meals to residents, such as New York City's Get Food program. I guess the question that I probably ask you is that, given the fact that you see these numbers, have we ever seen numbers like this in the borough of the Bronx before? Or have you ever, in your time, seen the Bronx in such a dire place where hunger is a major priority?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I would go back to the 80s. I'm a child of the 80s, and I remember growing up, the Bronx was still burning in the 80s. And I do remember, there being lines and lines and lines around churches and community centers in the Bronx, trying to get food, particularly around the holiday time. I still remember growing up as a youth where we would get these big block cheese, the cheese that, you go to the deli and they cut up for you. We would get that big block cheese, we would get pasta and canned goods and such. And I remember hunger being so huge back then. And I think in the case of the Bronx, hunger has been an issue even prior to COVID-19, right? So in 2019, Hunger Free America released a report that indicated that something like 260,000 residents in the Bronx went without adequate meals per day. And so, so I've seen it in the 80s. There was this report that Hunger Free America did, and they released in November of 2019 that indicated that, food insecurity has been an issue. But I think, this COVID-19 and its impact on the job market has exacerbated this so high. And it's looking like the numbers back when I was a kid in the 1980s, when everybody in the Bronx, literally everybody was on the food line. You were waiting for hours and hours with your mom or your abuela or your grandpa, just waiting for the food. And it feels like that 1980s moment when I was growing up, back when the Bronx was very desolate and didn't have much here. It feels like that moment right now in this time.
Yeah, I can relate. As a matter of fact, I told my church on Sunday, I said that, I remember that, standing online with my mother or staying online for my mother and my father. And that cheese, I said that cheese was very hard, but the cheese was real good. We called it the block cheese. You're absolutely right. But that made some of the best macaroni and cheese, brother. Don't you ever be fooled. That block cheese was the thing. Talk to me a little bit about where you go from here. Obviously, you have the report, you have these numbers, you have the findings. Where do you go from here?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And the report produces 4 policy recommendations. One, first and foremost, is making sure that as COVID-19 continues to ravish our land, to make sure that we're continuing to think about safety at locations that are serving food and are giving out pantry items. So that's number one, is just making sure that we take care of the basics of making sure that locations are clean and, and that we mitigate any potential transmission of the virus. And so just making sure that folks understand that and that we provide resources to those giving out food. So the second would be the K-12 program, the program that our schools have in place, where you can actually go and pick up a meal at a lot of our schools. And quite frankly, the rules are pretty liberal in that almost anyone could go there and pick up meals. I think that when we think about the providers that are providing these meals, I think it's critically important to think about that. And in the marketing of this program. Right now, that program isn't largely marketed. It was marketed during the height of COVID and the beginning parts of COVID back in March and April, that you can go to schools and pick up meals. I don't think that people in the community necessarily know that, but I think also what needs to be taken into account is making sure that the DOE looks at their partners, their vendor partners, to make sure that they're having partners that are responsible, that are culturally aware of the communities that they're serving, and making sure that they're providing meals that speaks to the culture and respective communities. Because despite people being poor, taste matters. People's tastes are real. People want to be just treated with dignity and respect. And so instead of that peanut butter and jelly sandwich that you're going to serve a family, how about you serve them, a grilled chicken with a vegetable, and that's a healthy option, right? So it's just thinking through that program, making sure it's marketed, but also thinking through the vendors that are part of that program. The third item that the report suggested was there's that benefit that many people don't know about that young people have that are enrolled in school. It's the food stamp benefit or the public assistance benefit. And not many young people and their families know that there's these cards that were given out during the beginning of COVID, that the legislation has been extended to September of 2021. So it's something like a couple of $100 extra of food stamps that are available to young people who are in schools for them and their families. And so that's another resource that's really important. And we just need to make sure that the community knows about it. We did a study of our young people in our programs, and they didn't know about the program. And this is a critical program that can support families and provide additional assistance. And then last, the report talks about really looking at these different food delivery programs like World Central Kitchen and New York City's Get Food. And it starts to think about other programs out there and other mechanism options to support particularly seniors, but those who may have medical conditions, thinking about how do we innovate in those programs? How do we just flip those programs upside down, particularly as we're still dealing with and battling with COVID? Yes, the vaccine here, but it's not going to get to certain communities for the next year or so. So how do we continue to think about the mitigating a potential transmission? So it thinks about like, how do we think about Uber Eats? It thinks about Postmates and DoorDash, and how do people who are on public assistance can utilize those apps potentially. Maybe it's not using the app, because if I'm an elderly person, 65, 70 years old, I probably don't know how to use an app, but perhaps there's some innovative methods that we can call in, or your elderly person could call in, and that gets transmitted to the app, and they get place an order that gets delivered to their home. So now we're not only advocating for pre-prepared meals, but we're advocating for grocery bags as well to be delivered to homes. And what we think is important here is allowing seniors and other vulnerable populations to be able to use their public assistance benefits for these programs. Right now, if I wanted to order from Uber Eats, I can't use my public assistance card. But what we're advocating for is that we should think about talking to these vendors about how do we open their services up to allow people in vulnerable populations, such as seniors, such as people with pre-existing health conditions, to be able to order from those programs. Because what it does too is it saves our families, right? It reduces the potential risk of the transmission of the virus, right? It allows seniors to truly stay home, order pre-prepared meals if they want, order groceries if they want, use any public assistance benefits that they may have to be able to do that as well. And so it makes it a lot more accessible. These are some of the things that we've been toying around with, or just ideas that will improve the way in which we get food to vulnerable communities. And then, last I would say is give. You can never stop giving resources to organizations that are fighting hunger. I know we work really closely with World Central Kitchen to reduce, those vulnerable households who feel food insecure. But the more we give to these organizations, such as the Thinkubator, World Central Kitchen, such as the Bronx Community Relief Effort, it would go a long way in making sure that we're taking care of those in our community.
Right. Is there a way to break down the amount of people when you talk about this food insecurity? Because what were we looking like pre-COVID versus post-COVID? Because pre-COVID there was a need, but I know post-COVID definitely, as we say, need exacerbated.
Sure. So pre-COVID, there were about 260,000 households in the Bronx that were food insecure. So, there's been numbers that have been produced all over. I don't think we have a definitive number, but we know prior to COVID, there were about 260 households. We think right now, based on the number of households who have applied for different social assistance programs or public welfare benefits, we think that number is probably about 600,000 families or households who are food insecure now. So almost nearly doubling what it was prior to COVID. And this is correlated with, at one time in the Bronx, we had an unemployment rate of about 25%. We're now at about 17%, but this does not account for the closed market, the market that people work off the books, right? So it does not necessarily count for that number. So while we're at 17 at the formal number, we're probably still at 25% with those who don't have formal employment, who work off the books, and who work in informal economies. So So we think that the need has doubled since 2019 during COVID-19, and it's of course correlated with our economy and the job market.
Yeah. So as these numbers are put together, obviously a lot of hard work was gone into it. How long did it take you to compile this report and put it together?
Sure. So we started this report early November, and we concluded it about a week ago. We got a final data in that we felt good about the data, and we felt like it was a representative sample of the Bronx. So it took a little over a month or so to do. We had produced a previous report, food insecurity, back in, I think, September or October. So this really builds off of that work, and it builds off of just our what we're seeing in our community, what we're seeing amongst our young people as well. And so it's been sort of a theme of many of the reports that Think Tank had done. So we did a food insecurity report, I think, in October. Prior to that, we did a report on the impact of COVID-19 on young people. And one of the major things that young people indicated was that they were concerned about food and water, and having access to those. And so we've just been seeing this theme around food and the need to best support our community. And so it's been for this particular report a little over a month, but it's been a theme of our work throughout the last couple of months.
Yeah, Dr. Ed Summers, we're going to leave it there, but we thank you so much for joining us here on the show, and certainly continue the great work of helping those in need. And as we look around during this time, a lot of people are in need in the borough of the Bronx, but at least you've got your finger on the pulse. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
All righty. Dr. Edward Summers, our guest here on the Social Justice Forum. We want you to stay with us. We do have more show coming up. We'll be right back right after this. welcome back here to the show. South Bronx Unite is an organization that is an all-volunteer coalition of South Bronx residents, organizations, and allies, all working together to improve and protect the social, environmental, as well as protecting economic future of the Mott Haven-Port Morris section of the South Bronx. Now, the area is surrounded by highways, fossil fuel power plants, waste transfer stations, subsidized diesel truck intensive facilities, and an 850-acre significant maritime industrial area, which is the largest in New York City. Now, in the South Bronx, there's about 49% of children who are living in poverty. Their asthma rate 8 times the national average, and they have the lowest rates per capita of access to green space. Joining us now to share a little bit more is the co-founder of South Bronx Unite. We have got Mychal Johnson here with us. And Mychal, good to have you.
Very good to be here, Daren. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey, good to have you as we talk about this issue of, really environmental justice. And when we talk about environmental justice, we know right there in your area, South Bronx, a lot of traffic, and literally and figuratively a lot of traffic. But when it comes to the part of residents and the population, always adversely affected by this traffic. So give us a little bit about where we are today with the work that's going on in your organization, as well as where the community stands right now.
Well, thank you for that. That's a great question, and acknowledging the situation that exists here on the ground. We're shouldered by 2 major highways, the Major Deegan and the Bronx and Bruckner Expressway. And you mentioned that significant maritime industrial area. We have an intense concentration of traffic built from the built environment, where we're trying to do heavy diesel or heavy industrial facilities. We're trying to, handle the traffic flow going in and out of Manhattan and up to upstate New York, all traversing through this community. The cumulative effects of decades of environmental injustice has caused, like you mentioned, the highest rates of asthma, really high rates of obesity and diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all traveling on these highways. So what we've done, because it hasn't really been done before here in Mott Haven and Port Morris, we partnered with the Melbourne School of Public Health and did air quality monitoring and traffic counting in and around our community to determine the type of quantity we're dealing with on a daily basis, but also what is it doing to the air quality and how's it really affecting people who live here.
And when we talk about living there, what's it been like? I mean, for someone who lives in that area, give us a bird's eye view of what it feels like living there with all the environmental concerns that you have.
We have a vibrant community. I mean, people have been struggling for decades to survive here. Through all the negative things that have happened from the top down. So, I mean, our children don't know why asthma is normalized, why 1 in 4 of them have asthma. When you go to the schools and talk to our children, you ask that question, do you know someone who has asthma or do you have asthma yourself? 90% raise their hands. That should not be the situation. And I think, as adults, as parents, as residents who live here, we're like, enough. Something has to change. And the way we get change is we think is through research. I mean, we all know there's a traffic issues here. We know it's been put upon us to handle the waste for the Bronx here in Mott Haven and Port Morris, to handle the fossil fuel power generation for the peaker stations that are lining our waterfront, to handling all these industrial sidings, because supposedly it's economic development and job creation, but it never has trickled down. All we have is the exhaust fumes from the vehicles. But it's not only that, there's other problems with the air quality. It's coming from the fuel we're burning in niche developments, the fumes coming from these industrial facilities. So it's a compound issue. It's a compound issue of also a non-mitigated flood zone that's our community sits in. And we're a peninsula community with no access to the waters that surrounds us. But what we do have is an unprotected waterfront that is going to see the next superstorms breach our shores, and all the things that are seeing in our peninsula and on our waterfront will inundate our community.
And when we talk about your community, we talk about the environmental impact. Let's talk about the community as a whole. You've got a lot of people who want to move into that community. You've got, even though with its present set of challenges, there are a lot of people who still want to come. Talks of gentrification, right? Not just talks, but we've seen people actually leave. I, for one, have always said on this show that I believe that the Bronx is being gentrified, particularly in that area. I've got a couple of people who we brought on the show. They don't call it gentrification, they call it progress. And so we respectfully disagree. But talk to us about, from your perspective, how do you see it? Do you equate it as gentrification, or do you equate it as being progress?
Definitely gentrification. It's fueled by real estate speculation. We fought initially to start fight, started off for the right to breathe, right? Now we're fighting for the right to stay. We know we can't tell people not to come and try to live here because this is a great community. I mean, this is one of the last communities in New York City that's one train stop away from Manhattan has not been gentrified, but now here it comes. We have these luxury high-rises being built on our waterfront, but none of which are where people who live here currently can afford to stay. So what happens with real estate speculation does lead and bleed and breathe and fuel gentrification. So they're displacing people because income comes in that can afford to pay higher rents, which then these landlords start charging more rents, and that displaces people who live here. So progress is not displacing folks. We're not saying, we should not have nice restaurants. We shouldn't have nice galleries or bookstores or places that we can go and recreate, meaning creating green space on our peninsula, which we don't have. We know those things are necessary for people who live here, who've suffered here, who's fought here for decades to make this community what it is. But our culture is what created this drive. They like what they see. They know, hell, we want to be a part of it. But don't displace us to be a part of what we created. And that's the problem. And that's why we looked at how can we stop gentrification and real estate speculation. And that led us to, which we haven't talked about, Daren, but our community came together and created and incorporated community land trusts to be a natural opposing force to real estate speculation. So when there's public space like our 850 acres of green space or peninsula that's public land that's not being used to provide a public benefit, we want to make sure we can identify publicly owned space that we can hold in perpetuity for the benefit of our community to stop the spread of gentrification and displacement.
Talk to us about the community trust. For somebody who doesn't know about it, give us a little bit more of an in-depth understanding as to what the community trust is, as viewers want to know more.
Yeah, a community land trust. There's several models around the Bronx, and around the city that are, what they're trying to do is hold land, public land, in the ownership of the community land trust, which has a board made up of the community and also membership of made up the community, that takes that land out of the speculative real estate market and creates what the community land trust feels, based on their membership, what's needed. That could be deeply affordable housing in perpetuity, like what's being done, say, in Cooper Square downtown. We have 5 CLTs, community land trusts, right now in the Bronx, including ours, the Mott Haven, Port Morris Community Land Stewards. Some of which I could say are trying to create permanently affordable housing or deeply affordable housing. But we're also looking at how do we look at the green space, looking at what else we need. We need recreation. Our community has one park, but we have a peninsula that's unprotected, but there's space along our peninsula that can be green space, can be recreational opportunities to enhance quality of life. And also create some places like we're looking at a center that's owned by the city, that's been vacant since 2011, and we're trying to acquire for the community land trust or get a long-term lease to create health, education, and the arts, which are some of the other things is vital to our successful attainment of quality of life.
So moving forward with the community trust, obviously you've got the plan laid forward. Talk to us about support from elected officials, from the powers that be. How receptive are they to the community trust?
The community land trust has been recognized by the city council, by the city of New York as a viable option for affordable housing creation, where it's owned by, with ground roots involvement of rural community. The city council has recognized it. We've received the 12 city community land trusts around the city have received city council discretionary funds for the last 2 years, trying to help to fund the growth of this opportunity as a tool, not as a total solution, but as a tool of community self-determination and development from a community ground roots platform. So where we're heading now is trying to really inform the community of the benefits of it, where it's not owned by one entity, but owned collectively. And that we feel is the way forward. I mean, it started off in the 60s with Black farmers in the South, in Georgia, how they could own land communally to reduce some of their costs, but to have a greater stake in a larger platform of creating healthier options for their families and for the community. So there's a lot of examples from Dudley Street in Boston to Vermont, where Bernie Sanders helped create a community land trust there in Vermont, in California, all across the country. The land trusts are now coming up because of need and necessity of being that natural opposing force to real estate speculation and how we're able to fight to stay.
Yeah. Let's talk economics for a moment. When we talk about Mott Haven, the economic future of Mott Haven. Of course, that community trust would definitely do things to improve the economy in Mott Haven. For where you see the economy right now, give me your assessment. What do you feel about the economy in Mott Haven, and where would you see things going in the future?
What we're trying to do is change what's been happening for too long. Tax subsidies have been given to large, like deep pocket developers for creating supposed affordable housing or creating job creation. They get hundreds of millions of dollars to come here to build their plants, to supposedly drive the economy. Again, it doesn't trickle down. So why don't you give that money, $100 million to say one entity like Fresh Direct? Why not give 100 businesses $1 million to create jobs? Then you see true change. So the way things have been done from the top down has to stop. It has to be for the people and by the people, and really engage in about what solutions look like and who knows best than the folks who live here. So if you're trying to benefit and create economic opportunity, talk to us. Talk to people in the community about what that looks like. And so make sure that it's sustainable, right? That it really is vibrant.
How frustrating is that? I didn't want to cut you off, but how frustrating is that? Because we know that many times when people do, and they talk about what's best for the community, many times it's people on the outside coming on the inside and telling and pretty much, quote unquote, dictating what goes on. Talk to me about your frustration there with people who may not necessarily have that landscape that you have.
Well, I think we've all been a part of that, where we have tried to let our voices be heard, but there've only been like a checking off of a box for participation instead of it being a part of the plan. Like the plan should start in the community, not where you come to us after it's been baked. And so what we're saying is it has to be like the Hearts Project we're coming up has been developed by visioning sessions, by actually coming to the community and we having come together and saying, what's the best use of a vacant 25,000 square foot building? Not where we say, this is what we're going to do with it. No, it's about, what are some of the ideas of some of the things we need and what should we create with these opportunities? So the way we discuss it, the way it's been done in the past, we have to change that dynamic and not be also a perpetuator of how the top down stuff has been going on. So the ideas that we come up with have to come from us. Has to come from people being not only listened to, but their plans being implemented in the plan, making that the plan.
So how do you see things moving forward? I mean, 2021 is right here around the corner. What's the work like for you and the organization?
The most important part of community land trust is community. The most important part of community organizing is community. And it's the hardest thing to do. But we're going to do a general membership meeting after the first of the year. We're going to talk more about what the benefits of self-determination, learning from the past, but knowing that we can plot a different future together. As long as we listen to each other, as long as we can grow together. So it's going to be about the work, man, getting information out about what are the best ways of moving forward? What's the best ways to create the self-determination we need to survive? And how can we do it more effectively and efficiently?
And I want to jump in, just elaborate a little bit more on that waterfront plan, because a lot of people aren't familiar with the waterfront plan, but it's huge and it's a game changer. So for somebody who doesn't know about the waterfront plan, educate us.
Oh man, thank you for that question. Excuse me. We look at the problems, and that was a problem. The problem of not getting 90,000 people to the waters that surround us, that our children don't even know we have a waterfront because of all the man-made impediments, but it's public land. So what we did was we identified through asset mapping 7 different sites along our peninsula that are underutilized, are either vacant, not being used, or underutilized. So we said, let's create a waterfront plan of seeing how we can activate these sites. So we went to the state Department of Environmental Conservation and got this plan prioritized. Never before has there been a waterfront plan prioritized for this community. It's been prioritized since 2014. It's time to activate it. And that's something, of course, as well, would be under the envelope of the community land trust. So it can't be of the whim of a governor or a mayor turned into public housing or housing period. That's not really affordable housing for people who live here. So the vital need for green space, because of the low quality of green space per capita for our residents, we need to create our own solutions. That's why the Community Garden Coalition was so strong. Out of necessity, we created community gardens in the Bronx. And that's why they're really nucleus of our communities. We need to create more of those types of spaces, especially where we can create recreation, but also flood mitigation. Because we were expecting the storm to be the next superstorm or hurricane or what have you that will inundate our communities. And now it turned out to be COVID. And that's why our fight for environmental justice, going back to that conversation, is important to do all these things around health, because we've seen how our fight for environmental justice was only the Band-Aid that was pulled off by COVID, that the harms have been done to us for decades only made us more susceptible to this virus, not only getting the virus, but dying from this virus. And you can see the Bronx has led the way with COVID infections and mortalities because of our environmental situations that exist. And so that's why the mission is circular about what we're trying to do here in terms of better health, better quality of life, access to recreation, increasing our ability to be sustainable as a people and not be susceptible to the next pandemic or superstorm. Because we will be served less or last. You know, it's always been the communities of color on the lower level, on the lower scale of the economic ladder that are always last. And we got to change that dynamic.
Yeah. Excited about 2021?
I am, man. I mean, we're going to get through this virus. We're going to survive. We're going to thrive. And I think we're going to be stronger. I mean, I read something in my son, who's 5 years old, his book. It said, a tree that weathers a storm grows deeper roots. And that's powerful, man, that we've always weathered the storm. We've come from a people been enslaved for 400 years, right? We come from a lot of injustices, and it's only made us stronger. You know, it looks like we have it, but we are here. We're survivors, and we'll continue to survive. And so, and we're going to strive. We're going to get stronger and grow deeper roots because of it.
Well, we're rooted together in this thing. So thank you so much, Mychal, for being with us here. Best wishes to you, the work that you guys are doing. And we hope that 2021 turns out to be much better for all of us here.
I agree. And we're going to make it better. Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much for being with us. And that about wraps it up for us here on the Social Justice Forum. I want to thank you for joining us. Listen, you can always watch us here. If you're watching on television, it is Optimum, channel 67. If you have Verizon, that's channel 2133. Or check it out anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. We thank you for joining us. Of course, join us next week. We want to up the ante with the conversation. We want to create awareness, and we want to give you a platform that promotes civic engagement. That's what the Social Justice Forums are, and hopefully we've done that today. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Have a happy holiday. Daren Jaime saying, God bless.